It was a cold, rainy evening in northern Oregon when Tom Brady, a veteran Greyhound night bus driver, reluctantly pulled on his faded navy jacket. He had over 15 years of experience behind the wheel, mostly on Interstate 84 between Portland and Boise. But that night, something didn't feel right. Tom had called out sick earlier that morning. His body achy, head pounding, and skin unusually clammy. His wife, Eleanor, had begged him to rest. But around 3 p.m., dispatch called. The replacement driver, a younger man named Jared, had come down with the flu and couldn't make it. Just this once, Tom, the dispatcher had pleaded. The passengers are already booked. We've got workers, students, and even a couple of vendors heading east. Tom sighed. He didn't want to leave Eleanor, but duty tugged at him harder than illness. By 6 p.m., he was at the Portland bus terminal, greeted by his usual route partner, Ricky Gomez, the bus conductor. Ricky knocked gently on the driver's side window. "Hey Tom, you all right, man? You look pale." "I'll manage," Tom replied with a tired nod. "Just keep an eye out. If I need to stop, I'll let you know." The bus, packed with tired passengers, pulled out of the station as the first droplets of rain began to speckle the windshield. Most passengers were quiet, nodding off, watching their phones, or holding onto duffel bags of merchandise. A few exchanged small talk. The road ahead was long. About 2 hours into the journey, the bus veered onto a quieter highway stretch cutting through the dense Mt. Hood National Forest. Tom had driven this road hundreds of times, but tonight, it felt strange. Too quiet, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. The wipers squeaked against the glass as the rain intensified. Tom kept glancing at the rearview mirror. It wasn't just paranoia. He felt like something, or someone, was watching from the treeline. His skin crawled beneath his jacket. Suddenly, the bus jolted with a loud thump. Panic erupted as Tom carefully pulled over onto the narrow shoulder. "What was that?" Ricky asked, rushing forward. Tom grabbed a flashlight and opened the door. Rain lashed his face as he crouched near the rear tire. But what confused him was the lack of any sharp object or glass. "Weird," he muttered. "Nothing here." Together, Tom and Ricky changed the tire in the pouring rain. Neither said much, both were uneasy. The forest felt alive, watching. As they climbed back into the bus, Ricky whispered, "Let's just get through this night, man." Back on the road, the forest seemed darker. The rain heavier. The headlights barely pierced the thick mist ahead. Tom's vision blurred momentarily, and he opened the window, letting cold air slap his face. But fatigue hit hard. His eyes closed. Seconds ticked by. Then, a deafening horn from the opposite lane. Tom jerked awake to see a pickup truck crawling ahead in his lane. Swerving to avoid a collision, the bus skidded on the wet road. Tires screamed. Screams erupted from the passengers. The world tilted. Steel and glass crunched. Darkness swallowed everything. Tom woke to sterile white light and the sharp scent of antiseptic. He was lying in a hospital bed, a bandage wrapped around his head and 4 lines in both arms. His throat burned, and his body felt like it had been thrown down a canyon, because it had. A nurse in scrubs approached. "Mr. Brady, you're in Providence Medical Center. You were in a major accident. Do you remember what happened?" Bits and pieces returned. The tire. The forest. The skidding. "My passengers," Tom croaked. "Are they okay?" The nurse hesitated, then stepped away. A moment later, a doctor, mid-50s, salt and pepper beard, entered the room with a grim look. "Mr. Brady," he said slowly, "you're lucky to be alive. The bus, it went off a ravine just past mile marker 129. Emergency crews pulled you out. You were unconscious. What about the others?" Tom's voice cracked. The doctor paused. "We recovered several bodies." "I'm sorry." Tom's heart sank. Guilt hit like a boulder. He turned his face away, tears stinging his eyes. The police arrived that afternoon. A young officer sat beside him, holding a small notepad. "Mr. Brady, we've reviewed the scene. Something's off." Tom looked up, puzzled. Off. There were long scratches, like claw marks, down the entire side of the bus. No vehicle could have made those. And multiple witnesses reported something. What something? The officer's jaw tightened. A large dark figure, red eyes, watching from the trees before the accident. Tom's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. Is it? The officer replied softly, then stood. "We're still investigating." That night, as the hospital wing quieted, Tom lay staring at the ceiling, haunted. Not just by the accident, but by the shadow, and the figure he swore he saw beside the bus, just before the crash. Thomas Brady spent the next few weeks at Providence Medical Center, recovering from his physical injuries, but the emotional wounds ran deeper. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw flashes of the accident. Screaming passengers, that deafening horn, and worse, the face of Ricky Gomez, his longtime conductor, just before everything went black. It wasn't long before the nightmares began. They always started the same way. Tom sitting alone in the driver's seat, surrounded by thick mist. Rain tapping against the windshield. Then, suddenly, a shadow would appear just outside the window, motionless. Watching. The glass would fog up, and a pale handprint would emerge from the inside. He'd always wake up drenched in sweat. The doctors called it survivor's guilt. Trauma. They prescribed sleeping pills and referred him to a counselor. But none of that could explain what happened on his fourth night in the hospital. Around 3:14 a.m., Tom heard slow, deliberate footsteps in the hallway. The hospital was usually quiet at night, but these steps were different. Heavy, rhythmic, and then they stopped, right outside his door. He sat up slowly. The door handle twisted. It opened just a crack. "Hello," he called out. No response. The door opened wider, and for a split second, he saw a silhouette, a tall figure wearing a dark uniform. Familiar. Terrifyingly familiar. "Ricky?" he whispered. The figure vanished. Tom lunged for the nurse call button, his breath shallow. By the time staff arrived, the hallway was empty. They reassured him it must have been a dream. Medication. But Tom knew what he saw. Ricky had stood there, silent, as if waiting. The next day, an officer returned to follow up on the crash investigation. "Mr. Brady," he said, pulling out a manila folder, "we finished processing the wreckage. There's something you need to see." He laid out several photographs. One showed deep claw-like gashes on the side of the bus. Another showed the broken guardrail. But the final photo chilled Tom's blood. On the rear emergency exit, a handprint. Smudged. Elongated. Inhuman. "What is that?" Tom asked. "We're not sure," the officer admitted. "But here's the part that really got us. The scratch marks. Claw marks," Tom corrected. "They weren't there during maintenance checks just a few days before. And the region where the crash occurred? Locals call it Dead Man's Curve. There have been strange sightings there for decades. Shadows. Apparitions." Tom didn't sleep that night. His mind replayed the officer's words over and over. That same night, the dreams escalated. Ricky wasn't just standing anymore, he was whispering, saying things Tom couldn't understand. His face was blank, but his eyes, filled with something between sorrow and accusation. 2 days later, Tom was discharged. But instead of going home, he was escorted directly to a holding facility. The families of the deceased passengers had filed lawsuits. A criminal negligence investigation had begun. The authorities claimed the accident was avoidable, that Tom had fallen asleep at the wheel. Tom didn't deny it. How could he? But he also couldn't explain what he saw, or what had forced his hand that night. He was placed in a county detention center near Baker City, Oregon, awaiting trial. At first, the cell was quiet, cold, lonely. But then, the hauntings followed. Every night, Tom would hear those same footsteps echo through the hallway. Then the sound of faint knocking. Sometimes it was at his door, sometimes from inside the cell walls. On the 7th night, Tom sat motionless on the edge of his cot when the temperature in the cell dropped suddenly. His breath fogged. The air turned still. And then he saw him again. Ricky, standing in the corner, still wearing his conductor's uniform, still silent. "Ricky," Tom whispered. "I'm sorry." The figure tilted its head slightly, as if trying to understand. Tom broke down. He wept. "I didn't mean for any of it to happen. I was tired. I should have pulled over. I should have." The lights flickered. The figure vanished. Tom pressed his back against the wall, breathing heavily. Days passed. He tried telling the prison chaplain about the dreams, the figures, the shadows. But the man only nodded politely and offered scripture. Eventually, Tom opened up to a kind-hearted guard named Officer Ray Barnes. "Something followed me from that crash," Tom confessed during lunch one day. "It's not just guilt. He's real." Ray was skeptical at first. "You're not the first guy here haunted by things, Tom." "But he's not angry," Tom said quietly. "He's waiting." "Waiting for what?" "I don't know." One stormy night, Tom awoke to a soft voice calling his name. "Tom, Tom." He sat up, his heart thudding. There, inches from his face, was Ricky, his pale, translucent form illuminated by lightning from the window. But this time, something was different. Ricky raised one hand and pointed toward the far wall. Tom turned. Nothing was there. "What do you want me to see?" he asked, trembling. Ricky pointed again, more urgently, his eyes wide with something like desperation. Then he whispered a single word, "Min." Before Tom could ask what it meant, Ricky dissolved into the shadows. It took Tom weeks to understand. Then, during one of his weekly phone calls, he heard a familiar name, Mina Gomez, Ricky's wife. She had been living in rural Idaho with their young son. When Ricky died, she was left alone and pregnant, struggling to survive. Tom's heart sank. Was this it? Was this what Ricky wanted? The wind bit at Tom Brady's face as he stepped off the Greyhound bus onto the cracked pavement of a forgotten town near Cascade, Idaho. It had been nearly 2 years since the accident that changed his life, since the bus skidded into that ravine and took with it the lives of 19 people, including his closest friend, Ricky Gomez. Tom's sentence had ended early for good behavior, but the weight he carried was far heavier than any prison term. He hadn't come back to his old life. He had no plans to return to Portland. Instead, he clutched a worn piece of paper with a name and address scrawled in blue ink, Mina Gomez. The small farmhouse sat on the edge of town, surrounded by barren fields and silence. Paint peeled from the wood siding. A rusted tricycle leaned against the porch. It was humble, isolated, and full of memories Tom wasn't sure he was ready to face. He knocked gently. Footsteps. The door creaked open. A woman stood in the frame, early 30s, tired eyes, hair pulled into a simple bun. She held a young boy behind her leg. Her face froze the moment she saw Tom. "Mrs. Gomez?" he asked, his voice catching. "Yes," she said carefully. "But I'm Tom. I worked with Ricky." Silence. "I was the driver," he added softly. Her lips parted in shock. "I know who you are." Tom lowered his gaze. "I came to apologize. I don't expect forgiveness. I need to do something right. For Ricky. For your son." Mina looked at him for a long time, her eyes unreadable. Finally, she opened the door wider. "Come in." The inside of the house was just as modest. Photos of Ricky on the wall, some taken in his bus uniform. The boy, no older than 5, peeked shyly from behind a chair. "He's named after his father," Mina said, handing Tom a cup of tea. Tom stared at the boy. His eyes, dark and warm, were just like Ricky's. "I never got the chance to say goodbye to him," Tom whispered. Mina nodded. "Ricky talked about you often. Said you were a good man. That you looked out for him." Tom flinched. "I didn't, Mina. I was exhausted. I shouldn't have been driving that night. I saw something on that road, something not human, but I still should have pulled over. I failed him. Mina took a slow breath. I believe you saw something. That curve has taken lives before. Locals here call it the Hollow Mile. The sheriff says strange things happen there. My father died in that same spot 20 years ago. Tom's eyes widened. Then, you believe me? I believe the world is bigger than we understand, she said gently. And I believe guilt can destroy a man if he lets it. Tom wiped his eyes. That night, Mina let Tom stay in the guest room. He stared at the ceiling for hours, wondering if Ricky would visit again. But this time, there was no shadow. No whisper. Only peace. The following weeks brought something unexpected. Tom didn't leave. Instead, he helped fix the fence, painted the old barn, repaired the leaking roof. He offered to pay for Ricky Jr.'s kindergarten books and even took him fishing. For the first time in years, Tom laughed. Slept without seeing twisted metal and fire. But one night, as he sat alone on the porch beneath a sky full of stars, he felt a presence. Turned. Ricky was there. Not in the shadows. Not in a dream. Standing at the edge of the yard. Solid. His uniform clean. A faint smile on his face. Tom stood, breath trembling. I'm doing my best, he said. I hope it's enough. Ricky didn't speak. He just nodded, then turned, and walked into the darkness. Gone. Tom stood still, overwhelmed, tears streaking his face. He finally understood. This was his second chance, not just to live, but to give meaning to what was lost. The next morning, Mina found him on the porch, eyes puffy but peaceful. He came to me last night, Tom said quietly. Mina didn't ask for details. She simply smiled. Weeks turned into months. Tom became part of the family. Not replacing Ricky, but honoring him. He never stopped visiting Ricky's grave in the nearby churchyard. He would bring fresh flowers and sit for hours, telling his old friend about little Ricky's first spelling test or how Mina's garden was finally growing again. And each time he stood up to leave, he whispered, "Thank you." Years later, the townsfolk spoke of Tom as a kind, quiet man who came from somewhere dark and helped heal a broken family. Some believed he was running from something. Others believed he had been given a mission from beyond. And in a way, both were true. Tom never drove a bus again. But every morning, when he walked Ricky Jr. to the local school, or helped Mina lift heavy boxes at the store, or taught the neighborhood boys how to fish, he drove something far more important forward: redemption. Because while you can't undo the past, you can choose to build something better in its place. And sometimes, the ones we've lost are still helping us do just that.